The coins hit the wooden counter with a sound that made Sarah Mitchell's stomach drop, because she knew before she even finished counting that something was wrong again. Sarah had been running her small ranch outside Amarillo, Texas, since her father died 2 years ago in 1873, and every month she made the same trip into town to sell whatever goods she could spare and buy the supplies she desperately needed to keep going. The trading post was the only place for miles where she could conduct her business, and Cornelius Vaughn knew it. He was a portly man with thinning hair slicked back with too much pomade, always wearing a vest that strained against his belly, and he had a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Sarah had suspected for months that he was cheating her, shortchanging her on payments and overcharging her for goods, but she had no proof and no alternative. The next trading post was a 2-day ride, and she could not afford to leave her ranch unattended for that long. Today she had brought in 3 good cowhides, tanned and ready, along with a basket of eggs and some preserved vegetables from her garden. Vaughn had examined everything with his usual critical eye, tutting and sighing as though she had brought him garbage instead of quality goods. He had offered her $12 for everything, which Sarah knew was at least $5 short of fair value. But when she tried to negotiate, he had simply shrugged and said he could find better elsewhere. They both knew that was a lie. She had no choice but to accept. But when he counted out the coins, there were only $9 on the counter. "Mr. Vaughn," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady, "you said $12. $9 is what I said, Miss Mitchell," Vaughn replied without looking at her, already turning to hang her cowhides on his storage hooks. "You must have misheard." "I heard you clearly. You said 12. "Your memory is playing tricks on you, dear. Perhaps the sun was too hot on your ride in. $9 for inferior goods is more than generous." Sarah felt heat rising in her cheeks, a combination of anger and humiliation. "Those hides are perfect and you know it. And you said $12 not 5 minutes ago." Vaughn turned back to her, and now his smile was gone entirely. "Miss Mitchell, I have been more than patient with you. Running a ranch alone is clearly too much for a woman of your limited capacities. Perhaps you should consider selling to someone who can actually make something of that land. Now you can take the $9 or you can take your goods and leave. Either way. I have other customers to attend to." Sarah looked around the trading post, but it was empty except for the 2 of them. Her hands were shaking as she reached for the coins. She needed them desperately. Her supplies were running low, and she still needed to buy flour, salt, and ammunition. But taking this money felt like swallowing poison. Every time she let Vaughn cheat her, she was admitting that she could not fight back, that she was powerless. She was reaching for the coins when the door opened, bringing with it a gust of hot Texas wind and a man she had never seen before. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of someone who spent long days in the saddle. His clothes were dusty from travel, worn denim, and a faded blue shirt, but his gun belt was well maintained, and his boots, though scuffed, were of good quality. He wore a wide-brimmed hat low over his eyes, but Sarah could see a strong jaw covered in a few days of stubble and a mouth set in a firm line. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30 at most, and he moved with the easy confidence of a man who knew exactly what he was capable of. The stranger stopped just inside the door and surveyed the trading post with a slow, deliberate gaze. His eyes, Sarah noticed, were a striking gray, like storm clouds, and they took in everything with an intelligence that made her think he was the kind of man who missed very little. "Help you?" Vaughn asked, his tone considerably more respectful than it had been with Sarah. "Just looking," the stranger said. His voice was deep and measured, with a slight drawl that suggested he might be from further south, maybe Louisiana or Mississippi. "Do not let me interrupt." Vaughn nodded and turned back to Sarah. "So, are you taking the money or not?" Sarah's hand hovered over the coins. $9. Again. "Pardon me for intruding on your again." "Pardon me for intruding on your business," he said, walking closer, but I could not help but overhear. "You told the lady $12, not $9. Vaughn's face flushed red. "This is a private transaction, friend. I suggest you stay out of it." I was standing right outside the window, the stranger continued, as though Vaughn had not spoken. Heard every word. You said $12 for the hides, eggs, and vegetables. Then you counted out 9. Sarah's heart was suddenly pounding. Someone had witnessed it, someone who was willing to speak up. She looked at the stranger with a mixture of hope and fear. Men like Vaughn did not appreciate being challenged, especially not in their own establishments. You're mistaken, Vaughn said. But his voice had lost some of its confidence. I said $9, the lady misheard, and apparently so did you. The stranger tilted his head slightly, and Sarah saw the corner of his mouth quirk up in something that was not quite a smile. My hearing is excellent, Mr. Vaughn. In my line of work, it has to be. You said 12, and I think you should honor that. And just what is your line of work? Vaughn demanded. I am a cowboy mostly. Worked cattle drives from here to Montana. Spent some time as a ranch foreman. Done a bit of everything, really. The stranger's hand rested casually on his belt, not touching his gun, but close enough to make his point clear. And I have never had much patience for men who cheat women out of what they are owed. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Sarah held her breath, waiting to see what would happen. Part of her wanted to tell the stranger to leave it alone, that it was not worth the trouble, but a larger part of her was thrilled to finally have someone stand up to Vaughn's bullying. Vaughn looked at the stranger, clearly weighing his options. The stranger was younger, stronger, and armed. Vaughn was neither young nor in fighting shape. After a long moment, Vaughn reached into his cash box with jerky, angry movements and slapped 3 more dollar coins onto the counter. $12, he said through gritted teeth. As agreed. Much obliged, the stranger said pleasantly. I knew we could clear up that confusion. Sarah quickly gathered all 12 coins and dropped them into her purse before Vaughn could change his mind. Her hands were still shaking, but now it was from relief and excitement rather than fear and anger. $12 was not a fortune, but it was fair, and more importantly, someone had made Vaughn back down. I need to purchase some supplies, Sarah said, determined to conduct her business now that she had her proper payment. Flour, salt, and ammunition. Of course, Vaughn said coldly. He gathered her items with rough, careless movements, clearly furious but unable to do anything about it with the stranger watching. When he tallied her purchases, Sarah watched him carefully, and she noticed the stranger watching too. Vaughn quoted her a price that was only slightly inflated, nothing like his usual gouging. She paid and gathered her supplies, feeling lighter than she had in months. As she turned to leave, she caught the stranger's eye. Thank you, she said quietly. That was very kind of you. Just doing what is right, ma'am, Shri, he replied, touching the brim of his hat in a polite gesture. Nobody should have to tolerate being cheated. Sarah wanted to say more, to express how much his intervention had meant to her, but she could feel Vaughn's eyes burning into her back, and she knew she needed to leave before he found some way to retaliate. She nodded to the stranger and stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, blinking as her eyes adjusted. She was loading her supplies into her wagon when she heard boots on the wooden sidewalk behind her. She turned to find the stranger standing there, his expression thoughtful. Miss, if you do not mind my saying so, that man in there has been cheating you for a while, has he not? Sarah hesitated, then nodded. I have suspected it for months, but I have no proof, and there is no other trading post close enough to be practical. My ranch is about an hour's ride from here, and I cannot leave it unattended for long. The stranger frowned. How much do you think he has stolen from you? I do not know exactly. Dozens of dollars probably, maybe more than 100 over the past year. He shortchanges me on what he pays for my goods, and he overcharges me for supplies. Today was the first time he was so blatant about it. Because he thought he could get away with it, the stranger said, his voice hard. Men like that, they keep pushing until someone pushes back. Well, you pushed back today, and I am grateful for it. Sarah finished securing her supplies and turned to face him properly. I am Sarah Mitchell. I run the Double M Ranch east of here. Kate Holloway, the stranger said, extending his hand. Sarah shook it, noting that his grip was firm but careful, the handshake of a man who knew his own strength. Pleased to meet you, Miss Mitchell. Are you just passing through Amarillo, Mr. Holloway? I was planning to be, but I'm in no particular hurry. I finished a cattle drive to Dodge City about 2 weeks ago, and I'm heading south to see if I can find work for the winter. No immediate plans. An idea was forming in Sarah's mind, one that was probably foolish, but that she could not quite dismiss. Mr. Holloway, would you consider doing me another favor? You do not have to, and I will certainly understand if you say no, but I would like to ask anyway. Cade raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? I would like to go back in there and talk to Vaughn about all the other times he has cheated me. With you as a witness, he might be willing to make it right. I know it is a lot to ask from a stranger, but what you did in there, making him give me my proper payment, that meant everything to me. If there is any chance I could get back some of what he has stolen, I have to try. Cade was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes studying her face. Sarah had the feeling he was taking her measure, trying to decide what kind of person she was. Finally, he nodded slowly. I think that's a fine idea, Miss Mitchell. A man like that needs to learn there are consequences for his actions, but we should do this smart. Do you have records of your transactions, Gregory? Yes, I keep a ledger at home. I write down what I bring to sell, what he pays me, and what I purchase from him. I started doing it after the first few times I suspected he was cheating me. Good, that is good. How about this? You go home and get your ledger. Bring it back here, and we will go through it with Mr. Vaughn. With written records and a witness, he will have a hard time denying what he has done. You would really do that? Stay here and help me? Cade smiled, and it transformed his entire face, softening the hard edges and making him look younger and more approachable. Miss Mitchell, I told you I'm in no hurry. And besides, I've never been able to stand by when someone is being wronged. My mother raised me better than that. Sarah felt something warm unfurl in her chest, a feeling she had not experienced in a long time. Gratitude, yes, but also something else, something she was not quite ready to name. Thank you, Mr. Holloway, truly. If you would like to ride out to my ranch, you can see the ledger, and maybe I can offer you dinner as a small repayment for your kindness. That sounds mighty nice, Cade said. Lead the way. The ride out to the Double M Ranch took just under an hour, and Sarah found herself sneaking glances at Cade as they traveled. He rode easily, comfortable in the saddle, in the way of men who spent most of their lives on horseback. His horse was a sturdy buckskin gelding, well cared for and responsive to the slightest command. Cade did not talk much during the ride, but when he did speak, it was to point out features of the landscape or to ask Sarah thoughtful questions about her ranch. How long have you been running it alone? He asked at one point. 2 years. My father died in the spring of 1873. He had a bad fall from his horse and hit his head. He never woke up. Sarah's throat tightened at the memory. Her father had been a strong, vital man, and his sudden death had left her reeling. My mother passed when I was a girl, so it was just him and me for a long time. When he died, the ranch became mine. No other family? No, my father had a brother, but he moved to California years ago. I have not heard from him since my father's funeral. I think he expected me to sell the ranch, and when I did not, he lost interest. You were what, 21? 22 when your father died? 23. I am 25 now. Cade nodded. That is young to be running a ranch alone, but I suppose you did not have much choice. No, I did not, and honestly, I did not want to sell. The Double M is my home. My father built it from nothing, and I intend to keep it going. Sarah heard the defiance in her own voice and softened her tone. I know people think I should have sold it or married someone who could run it for me. More courage than most men I know. The more courage than most men I know? The compliment made Sarah flush with pleasure, and she found herself smiling. Well, I have a lot of stubbornness, at least. I'm not sure if that is the same as courage. It is close enough. When they reached the Double M, Sarah felt a familiar mixture of pride and anxiety. The ranch was not large, only about 300 acres of grassland with a small herd of cattle, some chickens, a vegetable garden, and a modest house with a barn and a few outbuildings. Everything was well maintained, but showing signs of age and the wear that came from being run by one person instead of a full crew. Sarah worked from dawn until well past dusk every day, and even then, there were always tasks left undone. Cade looked around with an appraising eye, and Sarah braced herself for criticism. Instead, he said, "You have got a nice place here, Miss Mitchell. The land is good and everything looks well cared for." "Thank you. It is a lot of work, but I manage." "I imagine you do." Cade dismounted and tied his horse to the hitching post near the house. "I will help you unload your supplies if you like." "That would be very helpful." They worked together in companionable silence, carrying flour and salt and the other goods into Sarah's small kitchen. Cade moved with an easy efficiency, clearly accustomed to physical labor, and Sarah found herself watching the way his shoulders moved under his shirt, the way his hands handled the heavy sacks with no apparent effort. She looked away quickly, embarrassed by her own thoughts. Once everything was unloaded, Sarah retrieved her ledger from the desk in her small sitting room. It was a plain cloth-bound book, and she had filled several pages with her careful handwriting, documenting every transaction she had made at Vaughn's trading post for the past year and a half. "Let me make us some coffee and we can look through this worry," Sarah said, setting the ledger on her kitchen table. "That sounds perfect." While Sarah put coffee on to boil, Cade sat at the table and began paging through the ledger. She watched him from the corner of her eye as she worked, noting the serious expression on his face, the way his jaw tightened as he read. By the time she poured 2 cups of coffee and joined him at the table, he was shaking his head. "Miss Mitchell, if your records here are accurate, and I have no reason to think they are not, Cornelius Vaughn has been systematically cheating you for over a year. Look here." He pointed to an entry from the previous October. "You brought in 2 cowhides and a dozen jars of preserves. He paid you $8, but the going rate for tanned cowhides is at least $4 each, and good preserves can fetch 50 cents a jar. You should have gotten at least $14 for that transaction." Sarah leaned over to look, her shoulder nearly brushing Cade's. "I knew it was low, but I thought perhaps the quality was not as good as I believed. And here," Cade continued, flipping forward a few pages, "he charged you $6 for a 100-pound sack of flour. The standard price is $4, maybe $4.50 in a bad year. He overcharged you by at least $1.50. They went through the ledger together, Cade pointing out discrepancies on nearly every page. Underpaid or overcharged over the course, underpaid or overcharged over the course of 18 months. $130, Sarah said, staring at the number Cade had written at the bottom of a piece of scrap paper. "That is more than I make in 2 good months." "It is theft, plain and simple," Cade said, his voice tight with anger, "and he has been getting away with it because you had no one to back you up." Until now. Sarah looked up at Cade, and their eyes met. "This, for all of this." "Cade," he said, "this, for all of this." "Cade," he said, "please just call me Cade." "Cade," Sarah repeated, and she liked the way his name felt in her mouth. "And you should call me Sarah." "Sarah." He smiled at her, and again she felt that warm, unfurling sensation in her chest. "Now, we need to figure out the best way to approach Vaughn about this. He is not going to give up that much money without a fight." "Do you think he will even admit to it?" "Not willingly, but with your ledger and my testimony, we can make a pretty strong case. And if he still refuses, well, Amarillo has a sheriff. We could take this to him." Sarah bit her lip. "I have thought about going to the sheriff before, but I was worried he would not believe me. Or worse, that he would believe me but would not do anything about it because Vaughn is an established businessman, and I am just a woman struggling to keep a ranch." "Then we make sure he has no choice but to take you seriously," Cade said firmly. "You have records, you have a witness, and you have a legitimate grievance. That should be enough." Sarah wanted to believe him, but years of disappointment and frustration had taught her to be cautious. Still, looking at Cade's determined face, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe with his help, she could finally get justice. "All right," she said, "let us do it, but first, let me make you that dinner I promised." Cade grinned. "I am not going to argue with that." Sarah prepared a simple meal of fried salt pork, beans, and cornbread, along with the coffee they had already started. It was nothing fancy, but it was hearty and filling, and Cade ate with obvious appreciation. "This is delicious," he said after his first bite. "You are a fine cook, Sarah." "Thank you. I learned from my mother, and then my father taught me how to make do with what we had. Out here, you have to be practical." "You have certainly learned that lesson well." They talked as they ate, and Sarah found herself relaxing in Cade's presence. He had an easy way about him, a quiet confidence that made her feel safe. He told her stories about his cattle drives, about the places he had been and the people he had met. He had grown up in Mississippi, he said, the youngest of 4 brothers. His family had owned a small farm, but after the war, things had been hard, and one by one his brothers had drifted away to find work elsewhere. Cade had gone west, looking for opportunities, and he had found them in the cattle business. "I like the work," he said. "It is hard, but it is honest. You know exactly what you are doing and why. There is something satisfying about that." "I feel the same way about ranching," Sarah said. "Every day is difficult, but it is mine. I am building something, even if it is just trying to hold on to what my father started." "That is more than a lot of people can say." After dinner, Cade insisted on helping Sarah with the dishes, and they worked side by side at her small wash basin. It felt strangely intimate, this simple domestic task, and Sarah found herself acutely aware of Cade's presence beside her, the warmth of his body, the sound of his breathing. She tried to focus on scrubbing the plates, but her mind kept wandering to the man standing next to her. By the time they finished, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Cade stepped out onto Sarah's porch and looked out over the ranch, his expression thoughtful. "You have got a beautiful place here," he said when Sarah joined him. "The kind of place a man could be proud to call home." "I am proud of it," Sarah said. "Even on the hard days, I am proud." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun sink lower on the horizon. Finally, Cade said, "I should probably head back into town and find a place to stay for the night. We can go see Vaughn first thing in the morning if that suits you." "You could stay here," Sarah said, and then immediately felt her face heat. "I mean, I have a guest room. It is small, but it is clean. That way we could get an early start tomorrow." Cade looked at her, and Sarah could not quite read his expression. "Are you sure? I do not want to impose." "You are not imposing. After everything you have done for me today, it is the least I can offer." "Then I accept. Thank you, Sarah." Sarah showed Cade to the guest room, which was indeed small but clean and comfortable. She gave him some blankets and told him to help himself to water from the pump outside if he needed it. Then she retreated to her own room, her heart pounding. What was she doing? Inviting a strange man to stay in her house. It was improper, possibly even dangerous. But Cade did not feel like a stranger, and she did not feel afraid. Instead, she felt something she had not experienced in a very long time: excitement. The possibility of something new, something good. She lay in bed for a long time that night, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch and thinking about the man sleeping in the room down the hall. She thought about his gray eyes, his strong hands, his quiet competence. She thought about the way he had stood up to Vaughn without hesitation, the way he had spent hours going through her ledger, the way he had insisted on helping with the dishes. Sarah had not thought much about romance or love since her father died. There had been no time for it, no energy. The ranch had consumed all her attention, and the few men who had shown interest had quickly lost patience when they realized she was not going to be a compliant, traditional wife. But Cade was different. He treated her as an equal, respected her opinions, admired her strength. And Sarah could not deny that she was drawn to him in a way she had never experienced before. She finally fell asleep with a smile on her face, anticipation already building for the morning. Sarah woke before dawn, as she always did, and performed her morning chores with quick efficiency. She fed the chickens, milked her cow, and checked on her small herd of cattle. By the time the sun was fully up, she had breakfast ready: eggs, bacon, and fresh biscuits with butter. Cade emerged from the guest room looking well-rested and alert. He had clearly taken the time to wash up and shave, and Sarah noticed that without the stubble, his face was even more handsome, with high cheekbones and a firm, square jaw. "Good morning," he said, smiling at her. "Something smells incredible." "Good morning. I hope you slept well." "Best sleep I have had in weeks. That bed is very comfortable." They ate breakfast together, going over their strategy for confronting Vaughn. Cade suggested they start by presenting Sarah's ledger and calmly asking for restitution. If Vaughn refused, they would escalate to involving the sheriff. Sarah agreed, though her stomach was knotted with nervousness. "What if he still refuses, even with the sheriff involved?" she asked. "Then we will figure out another approach. But I do not think it will come to that. Vaughn is a bully, and bullies tend to back down when they are faced with real consequences." Sarah wanted to believe him, but she had dealt with Vaughn for long enough to know how stubborn and vindictive he could be. Still, she had to try. They rode into Amarillo together, arriving at the trading post just after it opened. "Miss Mitchell," he said coldly. "And Miss Mitchell," he said coldly. "And Mr. Holloway, was it? What can I do for you?" "Mr. Vaughn, we would like to speak with you about some discrepancies in the transactions Miss Mitchell has conducted with you over the past 18 months, Cade said, his tone polite but firm. Vaughn's eyes narrowed. "Discrepancies?" Sarah stepped forward and placed her ledger on the counter. "I have been keeping detailed records of everything I have sold to you and everything I have purchased from you. When we went through these records yesterday, we discovered that you have been systematically underpaying me for my goods and overcharging me for supplies." "That is absurd," Vaughn said, but Sarah noticed a flicker of something in his eyes. Fear, maybe, or guilt. "The numbers do not lie," Cade said. He opened the ledger and pointed to several entries. "Here, here, and here. Each time you either paid Miss Mitchell far less than market value for her goods, or you charged her well above market rates for her purchases. Over the course of 18 months, these discrepancies add up to approximately $130. Vaughn laughed, but it sounded forced. "This is ridiculous. I run an honest business. If Miss Mitchell is dissatisfied with my prices, she is free to take her business elsewhere." "You know I cannot do that," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. "The next trading post is 2 days away. You have been taking advantage of that fact, and you know it." "I have taken advantage of nothing. You agreed to every transaction. If you did not like the prices, you should have spoken up at the time." "I did speak up," Sarah said, her voice rising. "Many times. And every time you told me I was wrong, or that I had misunderstood, or that I was simply too ignorant to know the real value of things." "Because you were wrong," Vaughn shot back. "You are a woman trying to run a ranch by herself, something you are clearly incapable of doing properly. It is not my fault that you cannot manage your finances." Cade's jaw tightened, and he took a step closer to the counter. "Mr. Vaughn, I suggest you be very careful about what you say next. Miss Mitchell has been more than patient with you. She has documented everything, and she has been nothing but professional. Now you can either acknowledge what you have done and make it right, or we can take this matter to Sheriff Palmer and let him sort it out." Vaughn's face had gone red. "You are threatening me?" "I am informing you of your options," Cade said calmly. $130, Mr. Vaughn. That is what you owe Miss Mitchell. Pay her back, and we will consider the matter settled." "I do not owe her anything." "Then we are going to the sheriff." Cade picked up the ledger and took Sarah's arm gently. "Come on, Sarah, we are wasting our time here." "Wait," Vaughn said, and there was a note of panic in his voice now. "Just wait a minute." Cade and Sarah stopped and turned back. Vaughn was gripping the edge of the counter, his knuckles white. He looked from Cade to Sarah and back again, clearly calculating his options. "Even if I did agree that there were some minor discrepancies," he said slowly, $130 is an outrageous sum. I do not keep that kind of money on hand." "Then you can pay Miss Mitchell back over time," Cade said. "We can work out a payment plan." "Or you could pay her back in goods," Sarah suggested. "Credit toward future purchases." Vaughn shook his head vehemently. "No, absolutely not. I am not admitting to anything. and I am certainly not giving away free goods or money based on the accusations of a woman and a drifter. Cade's expression hardened. All right then, Sheriff it is. The sheriff's office was just down the street, and Sheriff Thomas Palmer was a grizzled man in his 50s with a weathered face and sharp blue eyes. He listened patiently as Sarah and Cade explained the situation, examining the ledger carefully and asking pointed questions. Mr. Vaughn has something of a reputation, Palmer said when they finished. You are not the first person to suggest he plays fast and loose with his prices, but he is also a prominent businessman, and making accusations without solid proof can be tricky. We have proof, Cade said, tapping the ledger. Everything is documented right here. I can see that, and it certainly looks suspicious, but Vaughn will just argue that these were all agreed upon prices, and that Miss Mitchell is misremembering or exaggerating. So you are saying there is nothing you can do? Sarah asked, feeling her hopes start to crumble. I am saying it is complicated, Palmer replied, but let me come back to the trading post with you. Maybe if Vaughn sees that I'm taking this seriously, he will be more willing to cooperate. The three of them returned to the trading post, where Vaughn was waiting with his arms crossed and a smug expression on his face. That expression faltered when he saw Sheriff Palmer. Thomas, Vaughn said, trying to sound casual, what brings you by? Miss Mitchell and Mr. Holloway here have made some serious allegations against you, Cornelius. I wanted to hear your side of things. My side? There is no side. This is all nonsense. The woman is confused, and this cowboy is trying to make trouble. Palmer held up the ledger. I have been looking through Miss Mitchell's records. They are very detailed, Cornelius, and they show a pattern of you paying below market rates and charging above them. Those are just her opinions about what market rates should be, Vaughn protested, and prices fluctuate. Sometimes I pay less, sometimes I pay more. That is the nature of business. Then you would not mind if I brought in an independent appraiser to look at some of Miss Mitchell's goods and give us a professional opinion on their value? Palmer suggested. Vaughn paled. That seems excessive. Does it? Because if you have been conducting honest business, you should have nothing to worry about. There was a long silence. Vaughn looked trapped, his eyes darting from Palmer to Cade to Sarah. Finally, he sagged. Fine, he said bitterly. Perhaps there have been some small misunderstandings. I am a busy man, and sometimes I make mistakes with my calculations. So you admit you have been cheating Miss Mitchell? Palmer asked. I admit that there may have been some unintentional errors, Vaughn said carefully, but $130 is far more than any reasonable estimate of those errors. Cade stepped forward. Then let us go through the ledger together, item by item, and you can explain which prices you dispute and why, and we will get that independent appraiser in here to settle any disagreements. Vaughn looked like he wanted to argue, but with the sheriff standing right there, he clearly felt he had no choice. Fine, but this is going to take hours. Then we had better get started, Sarah said. They spent the rest of the morning and most of the afternoon going through Sarah's ledger line by line. For each transaction, Cade or Sarah would state what they believed the fair price should have been, and Vaughn would have to either agree or provide a reason for the discrepancy. Sheriff Palmer took notes, and occasionally he would interject with his own knowledge of typical prices. At first, Vaughn tried to argue about everything, but as the process wore on and it became clear that Sarah's records were meticulous and that Cade knew exactly what fair prices should be, Vaughn's resistance began to crumble. By the time they reached the end of the ledger, even Vaughn could not deny that he had been systematically overcharging and underpaying Sarah. The total comes to $123.50, Sheriff Palmer said, tallying up the final numbers. That is what you owe Miss Mitchell, Cornelius. Vaughn looked ill. I do not have that much in cash. Then you will pay her in installments, Palmer said. $25 now, and the rest in monthly payments of $10 until the debt is paid in full. And from now on, you will conduct all transactions with Miss Mitchell fairly, or you will answer to me. Are we clear? This is outrageous, Vaughn muttered. Are we clear? Palmer repeated, his voice harder. Yes. Fine. We are clear. Vaughn went to his cash box and counted out $25 with shaking hands. He slapped the coins on the counter in front of Sarah, not looking at her. Thank you, Mr. Vaughn, Sarah said, gathering the coins. She was trembling with a mixture of relief and triumph. $25 and the promise of more to come. It was not everything he owed her, but it was a start. And more importantly, it was justice. Outside the trading post, Sheriff Palmer tipped his hat to Sarah and Cade. "You did good work here today," he said. "Not many people are willing to stand up to men like Vaughn. I will make sure he keeps his word about those payments." "Thank you, Sheriff," Sarah said. "I could not have done this without your help. And I could not have done it without Cade," she added, turning to smile at him. Cade smiled back, and Sarah felt that now familiar warmth spread through her chest. "We make a good team," he said. Once the sheriff had left, Sarah and Cade stood on the sidewalk outside the trading post, both of them still processing what had just happened. "I cannot believe we actually did it," Sarah said. "I got my money back. Well, some of it at least." "You will get the rest," Cade assured her. "Palmer will make sure of it. I have been letting Vaughn cheat me for so long, and I was starting to think there was nothing I could do about it, but you showed me that I could fight back, that I did not have to just accept being treated unfairly." "You did the hard part," Cade said. "You kept records, you stood up for yourself, and you did not back down. All I did was provide some support." "You did much more than that, and you know it." Sarah impulsively reached out and took his hand. "Cade, I do not know how to thank you properly. You helped me get justice, and you did not even know me." Cade looked down at their joined hands and then back up at her face. His gray eyes were intense, and Sarah felt her breath catch. "I am glad I could help," he said quietly. "But if I'm being honest, it stopped being just about justice pretty quickly." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I have enjoyed spending time with you, Sarah, more than I expected to. You are smart and brave and determined, and I admire all of those things about you, and I would like to keep spending time with you if you would let me." Sarah's heart was racing. "Are you saying you want to stay in Amarillo?" "I am saying I do not want to leave just yet. I know I said I was passing through, but maybe I could stay for a while, help you out on your ranch if you need an extra hand. I am good with cattle and horses, and I can mend fences and fix roofs and do just about anything else that needs doing. Cade, I could not possibly afford to pay you ranch hand wages." "I am not asking for wages. I am asking for a chance to get to know you better. You could pay me in meals and a place to sleep, and that would be more than enough." Sarah wanted to say yes immediately, but caution held her back. "Cade, are you sure? You said you were heading south to find work. I do not want you to feel obligated to stay because you helped me." "I do not feel obligated. I want to stay, but only if you want me to." Sarah looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity there. And in that moment, she made a decision. Life was short and uncertain, and opportunities like this did not come along often. Cade Holloway was a good man, and she was drawn to him in a way she could not explain and did not want to ignore. "Yes," she said, "I would like you to stay." Cade's face broke into a wide smile. "Then I will stay." The days that followed were some of the happiest Sarah could remember. Cade settled into life on the Double M Ranch with an ease that astonished her. He was up before dawn every morning, working alongside her to complete the endless list of chores that ranch life demanded. He repaired the sections of fence that had been sagging for months, replaced rotted boards in the barn, and helped her round up the cattle for branding. He was patient with the animals, skilled with his hands, and tireless in his work ethic. But more than his help with the physical labor, Sarah treasured the companionship. For 2 years she had been alone, carrying the weight of the ranch entirely on her own shoulders. Now she had someone to talk to share meals with, to laugh with. Cade had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard at first, but that she quickly came to love. He told her stories about his cattle drives, painting vivid pictures of life on the trail, and he listened with genuine interest when she talked about her father and her memories of growing up on the ranch. They fell into an easy rhythm, working together during the day and spending their evenings on the porch, watching the sun set and talking about everything and nothing. Sarah found herself looking forward to those evening conversations more than anything else. There was something deeply intimate about sitting beside Cade in the fading light, sharing thoughts and dreams, feeling the warmth of his presence beside her. 3 weeks after Cade arrived, Sarah rode into town to check on Vaughn's progress with the payments. True to his word, Vaughn had $10 ready for her, though he handed it over with obvious resentment. Sarah did not care. Every coin she got back was a vindication, proof that she had been right to fight for what was owed to her. On her way out of the trading post, she ran into Mrs. Eleanor Henderson, a widow who ran a successful dress shop in Amarillo. Mrs. Henderson was in her late 50s, a practical woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She had always been friendly to Sarah, one of the few people in town who did not seem to judge her for running the ranch alone. "Sarah, dear," Mrs. Henderson said, smiling warmly, "I have been hearing the most interesting things about you." "Oh?" Sarah said warily. "Yes. People are saying you confronted Cornelius Vaughn about cheating you, and that you got Sheriff Palmer involved, and that a handsome young cowboy helped you do it." Sarah felt her cheeks heat. "Well, yes, that's all true." "Good for you," Mrs. Henderson said firmly. "That man has been taking advantage of people for years, and it is high time someone stood up to him. And this cowboy, is he still around?" "He is staying at my ranch for a while," Sarah admitted, "helping me with the work." "Mrs. Prying into my personal life?" "Prying into my personal life?" "Absolutely," Mrs. Henderson said without shame. "You are a lovely young woman, Sarah, and you deserve some happiness. If this cowboy makes you smile, then I am all for it." Sarah did not know what to say to that, so she simply thanked Mrs. Henderson and hurried on her way. But the older woman's words stayed with her. Did Cade make her smile? Yes, he did. He made her smile and laugh and feel things she had not felt in years, if ever. By the time she returned to the ranch, Sarah had made another decision. She was tired of being cautious, tired of holding back. Life had taught her that nothing was guaranteed, and she did not want to waste the time she had with Cade by pretending she did not feel what she was feeling. She found him in the barn, grooming his horse. He looked up when she entered and smiled at her, and Sarah felt her heart do a little flip in her chest. "How did it go in town?" he asked. "Vaughn had the $10 just like he was supposed to, only $90 left to go." "That is good. You're getting there." Sarah stepped closer, suddenly nervous. "Cade, can I talk to you about something?" He set down the brush he had been using and gave her his full attention. "Of course. What is on your mind?" "I have been thinking about you staying here, about us working together and spending time together, and I realized that we never really talked about what happens after Vaughn finishes paying me back, or after the work around the ranch is caught up." Cade's expression grew serious. "What are you asking, Sarah?" "I am asking what you want," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you plan to leave once the work is done, or do you want to stay longer?" "What I want," Cade said slowly, "is to stay as long as you will let me. But I do not want to assume anything. This is your ranch, your home. I am just a guest here." "You are more than a guest," Sarah said, and she took another step closer so that they were only a few feet apart. "Cade, you must know that. You have become important to me. These past few weeks, they have been the best I have had in years, and it is because of you." Cade's eyes widened slightly. "Sarah." "I know this is probably too soon," Sarah said, the words tumbling out in a rush now. "I know we have only known each other a short time, but I cannot help how I feel. You make me happy, Cade. You make me feel less alone, and I hope that maybe you feel the same way." Cade closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. "Moment I saw you standing up to Vaughn. Moment I saw you standing up to Vaughn, trying so hard to be brave even though you were scared, I have been drawn to you. And every day I spend with you, I fall a little bit more. You are the strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I do not want to leave. Not now. Not ever, if you will have me." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "You mean that?" "I mean it with everything I have." And then Cade was kissing her, and Sarah was kissing him back, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. His lips were warm and gentle, and his hands cupped her face with a tenderness that made her heart ache. Sarah wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, pouring all her feelings into the kiss. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Cade was smiling at her with such joy that Sarah could not help but smile back. "So you are staying?" she whispered. "I am staying," he confirmed, "for as long as you want me." "Forever then," Sarah said, and she kissed him again. The weeks turned into months, and Cade became an integral part of the Double M Ranch. He worked tirelessly, and under his guidance, the ranch began to thrive in ways Sarah had not thought possible. Together they expanded the herd, improved the pastures, and even managed to negotiate better prices with some of the merchants in Amarillo now that Cade was there to back Sarah up. Vaughn continued to make his monthly payments, each one a small but satisfying reminder that justice had been served. But the ranch's success was only part of the story. The real transformation was in Sarah herself. She was no longer alone, no longer carrying the burden of everything by herself. She had a partner, someone who respected her, supported her, and loved her with a depth that took her breath away. Cade proposed to her on a warm evening in late September, just as the sun was setting. They were sitting on the porch, as they often did, and he reached over and took her hand. "Sarah," he said, "I know we have not been together for very long by some people's standards, but I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my days with you. Will you marry me?" Sarah did not even have to think about it. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Cade, I will marry you." They were married in November in a simple ceremony at the small church in Amarillo. Mrs. Henderson stood up for Sarah, and Sheriff Palmer agreed to stand with Cade. It was not a large wedding, but it was perfect, filled with warmth and love, and the promise of a future together. The first year of their marriage was a time of adjustment and growth. Cade legally partnered with Sarah in running the ranch, and they made decisions together, pooling their knowledge and experience. There were challenges, of course. A harsh winter tested their resources, and a summer drought made water scarce. But they faced every obstacle as a team, and each success brought them closer together. In the spring of 1876, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. She was nervous at first, worried about how she would manage the physical demands of ranching while carrying a child. But Cade was endlessly supportive. He took on more of the heavy work, insisting that Sarah rest when she needed to, and he was so excited about becoming a father that his joy was infectious. Their son was born in December, a healthy baby boy with Cade's gray eyes and Sarah's dark hair. They named him Daniel, after Sarah's father, and from the moment Cade held his son for the first time, Sarah knew that their family was complete. Well, almost complete. Almost. 2 years later, Sarah gave birth to a daughter, Emily, who had her mother's stubborn determination and her father's easy smile. And 3 years after that, another son, James, who was curious and adventurous from the day he could walk. The Double M Ranch grew along with their family. They built a larger house to accommodate their expanding household, and they hired ranch hands to help with the work. Cade was a patient and skilled teacher, and several young men learned the cattle business under his guidance before going on to start their own ventures. Cornelius Vaughn finished paying back every stolen coin by the spring of 1877, and not long after he sold his trading post and left Amarillo. Sarah heard rumors that he had moved to Kansas, but she did not care. He was part of her past, a reminder of a time when she had felt powerless. Now she was anything but. "Two have built something special here," he said. "You've been a great help to me, and I'm proud of you both." Sarah and Cade looked at each other, their faces filled with gratitude and pride. "Thank you, Sheriff Palmer," Sarah said. "We'll miss you." "I'll miss you too," Sheriff Palmer said, "but I'm glad to see you both doing well." "We'll miss you too," Cade said. "We'll miss you too," Sarah said. "We'll miss you too," Cade said. "We'll miss you too," Sarah said. "We'll miss you too," Cade said. "We'll miss you too," Sarah said. "We'll miss you too," Cade said. "We'll miss you too," Sarah said. "We'll miss you too," Cade said. "We'll miss you too," Sarah said. "We'll miss you too," Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss you too, Cade said. We'll miss you too, Sarah said. We'll miss too have built something special here, he said. Not just a successful ranch, but a real partnership. That is rarer than you might think. Mrs. Henderson remained a close friend, and as the years passed, she became like a grandmother to Sarah and Cade's children. She taught Emily how to sew, and told all three children stories about their mother's courage in standing up to Vaughn. As the 19th century drew to a close, Sarah and Cade found themselves looking back on their lives with deep satisfaction. The Double M Ranch was prosperous and well respected. Their children were healthy and happy, and their love for each other had only deepened with time. One evening in the summer of 1895, they sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set just as they had done on so many evenings before. Their children were grown now. Daniel was running the ranch alongside his father, Emily was married to a local school teacher, and James was studying law in Austin, planning to return to Amarillo to practice. "Do you ever think about that day in the trading post?" Sarah asked, leaning her head on Cade's shoulder. "The day we met?" "I think about it all the time," Cade said, wrapping his arm around her. "If I had not walked through that door, if I had not heard Vaughn cheating you, my entire life would have been different." "Mine too," Sarah said. "I was so close to giving up, Cade. I did not think I could keep fighting, but then you stood up for me and everything changed." "You would have found a way," Cade said. "You are the strongest person I know." "Maybe, but I'm glad I did not have to do it alone." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the sky turned from gold to pink to deep purple. Finally, Sarah said, "We have had a good life, have we not?" "The best life I could have imagined," Cade agreed. "And it is not over yet. We still have years ahead of us." "I hope so," Sarah said. "I want to see our grandchildren grow up. I want to watch the ranch continue to thrive. I want to spend every day I have left with you." Cade kissed the top of her head. "Then that is what we will do." And they did. Sarah and Cade lived to see their grandchildren, and even one great-grandchild before Sarah passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1908 at the age of 60. Cade followed her a year later, unable to imagine a life without the woman who had been his partner, his love, and his best friend for over 30 years. The Double M Ranch remained in the family, passed down through Daniel and his children, a testament to the strength and determination of the woman who had refused to give up on her father's dream. And the story of how Sarah Mitchell stood up to the crooked trading post owner, and how a cowboy named Cade Holloway helped her reclaim what was rightfully hers, became a legend in Amarillo, told and retold through the generations. It was a story about justice, about courage, about the power of standing up for what is right. But most of all, it was a love story, the kind that reminded people that sometimes the best things in life come when you least expect them, and that true partnership can transform not just two lives, but an entire legacy. In the years that followed, the descendants of Sarah and Cade would walk the land of the Double M Ranch and remember the woman who had fought so hard to keep it, and the man who had loved her enough to stay. They would tell their children about the day in 1875 when everything changed, when a cowboy walked into a trading post and saw an injustice he could not ignore, needed you most, and knowing that they needed you most, and knowing that they would do the same for you. The ranch house that Sarah and Cade built still stood well into the 20th century, though it was expanded and modernized over the years, but the porch remained largely unchanged, the same porch where they had sat countless evenings watching the sunset and talking about their dreams. It became a family tradition for newlywed couples to spend their first evening on that porch, honoring the love story that had started it all. The coins that Vaughn had returned, all $133.50 of them, were kept in a special box, a reminder that justice was possible even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Sarah had intended to spend that money on the ranch, but in the end she never did. It felt important to preserve it, to remember where it came from and what it represented. When the trading post building in Amarillo was finally torn down in 1920 to make way for a more modern structure, Daniel Mitchell purchased one of the old wooden beams and had it carved with an inscription: "Justice delayed is not justice denied. Stand up for what is right." He hung it in the main house of the Double M Ranch, where it remained for generations. The legacy of Sarah and Cade was not just in the land they had worked or the family they had raised. It was in the values they had instilled, the belief that honesty mattered, that fairness was worth fighting for, and that love could transform even the hardest of circumstances into something beautiful. Emily Mitchell, their daughter, became a teacher and devoted much of her life to educating young women. She often told her students about her mother, about how Sarah had refused to be intimidated or cheated, about how she had stood her ground even when it seemed impossible. "My mother taught me that being a woman does not mean being weak," Emily would say. "It means being strong enough to do what needs to be done, regardless of what others think you are capable of." James Mitchell, their youngest son, did indeed become a lawyer, and he used his skills to help other small ranchers and farmers who were being taken advantage of by larger, more powerful interests. He always said that his parents had taught him the importance of standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves, and he devoted his career to making that a reality. Daniel, who took over the ranch, proved to be just as skilled and dedicated as his parents. He married a woman named Catherine, who reminded him in many ways of his mother, strong and independent with a fierce determination to make her own way in the world. Together they raised 5 children on the Double M, instilling in each of them the values that Sarah and Cade had lived by. As the 20th century progressed and the world changed in ways that Sarah and Cade could never have imagined, the Double M Ranch adapted but never lost sight of its roots. Through droughts and depressions, through wars and social upheavals, the ranch endured, a testament to the foundation that Sarah and Cade had built together. When historians later studied the development of ranching in the Texas Panhandle, they often noted the Double M as an example of how perseverance and partnership could create something lasting. They told the story of Sarah Mitchell, the young woman who had refused to be cheated, and Cade Holloway, the cowboy who had helped her reclaim her dignity and her rightful earnings. But they also noted that the real story was not just about one confrontation in a trading post. It was about what came after, about 2 people building a life together based on mutual respect and love. In 1975, exactly 100 years after Cade had walked into Vaughn's trading post, the Mitchell family held a centennial celebration at the Double M Ranch. Descendants came from all over the country, some of whom still lived on the land, others who had spread out to pursue different dreams. They gathered on that same porch where Sarah and Cade had spent so many evenings, and they told the old stories, keeping the memory alive for the newest generation. Porch, and addressed the assembled family. Porch, and addressed the assembled family. "We are here today because of 2 people who refused to accept injustice," she said, "because a woman named Sarah Mitchell had the courage to document the wrongs done to her, and because a man named Cade Holloway had the integrity to help her set things right. But more than that, we are here because they loved each other, and they built something that was meant to last." Every one of us carries a piece of that legacy. Every one of us has benefited from their courage and their love, and it is our responsibility to carry that forward, to stand up for what is right, to treat others with respect and fairness, and to love with the kind of depth and commitment that they showed us is possible. The gathered family applauded, and there were tears in many eyes as they thought about the ancestors who had started it all. Later that evening, As the celebration continued, the older members of the family walked the younger ones around the ranch, pointing out features that had been there since Sarah's time, telling stories about the early days, making sure that the history was not forgotten. The box containing the coins that Vaughn had returned was brought out and passed around, each person holding it for a moment, feeling the weight of that hard-won justice. The carved beam with its inscription about standing up for what is right was photographed and discussed. And throughout it all, there was a sense of gratitude and pride, a recognition that the foundation built by Sarah and Cade was strong enough to support generations. As the sun set on that centennial celebration, Sarah Catherine stood on the porch with her own young son, looking out over the land that her ancestors had worked so hard to preserve. "Your great-great-great-grandmother was a very special woman," she told him, "and your great-great-great-grandfather was a very special man. They showed us what is possible when you stand up for yourself and when you find someone who truly loves and respects you." "Will you tell me the story?" the little boy asked. And so she did. Starting with the now familiar words, "There was a time when the trading post owner cheated your grandmother, and a cowboy saw it and made him return every stolen coin." She told the story just as it had been told to her, emphasizing the courage and the justice and the love, making sure that her son understood not just what had happened, but why it mattered. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red and purple, the same colors that Sarah and Cade had watched together on so many evenings. And in that moment, it felt as though their spirits were still there, still watching over the land they had loved, still present in the legacy they had created. The Double M Ranch continued to thrive well into the 21st century, though the nature of ranching changed with the times. New technologies and methods were adopted, but the core values remained the same: honesty, hard work, respect, and love. The descendants of Sarah and Cade never forgot where they came from or the sacrifices that had been made to give them the opportunities they enjoyed. And whenever a member of the family faced a difficult decision, whenever they were tempted to take the easy way out or to compromise their values for short-term gain, they would remember Sarah standing in that trading post demanding what was rightfully hers. They would remember Cade stepping forward to support her, not because he had to, but because it was the right thing to do. And they would remember that the greatest legacy is not measured in acres or cattle or dollars, but in the example we set for those who come after us. The story of the trading post owner who cheated Sarah Mitchell and the cowboy who helped her reclaim what was stolen became more than just a family legend. It became a reminder that justice is always worth fighting for, that love can emerge from the most unexpected circumstances, and that the choices we make in moments of crisis can echo through generations. Sarah and Cade had not set out to create a dynasty or to become legends. They had simply tried to do what was right, to build a good life together, to raise their children with strong values, and to leave the world a little bit better than they found it. But in doing so, they created something that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes, something that continued to inspire and guide their descendants more than a century after they had first met. And so the story lived on, told and retold, adapted to each new generation, but never losing its essential truth: that courage matters, that justice is worth fighting for, that love built on mutual respect can withstand anything, and that sometimes the best things in life begin with a single moment of standing up for what is right. The Double M Ranch stood as proof of that truth. Its land still worked by the descendants of the woman who refused to be cheated and the cowboy who stood beside her. And every evening, when the sun set over the Texas Panhandle, painting the sky in those same brilliant colors, it was as though Sarah and Cade were still there, still sitting on that porch, still watching over the legacy they had created together, still reminding everyone who came after them that love and justice and courage were not just abstract ideals, but the foundation upon which a good life must be built.